Hi Year 3, this is your Thursday comprehension lesson, and today it is about Rosa Parks, and it's again a non-fiction text, which is an information text, so hopefully you'll be able to remember that from when we've looked at non-fiction before, and it is factual, so it's information. What I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask you to pause the video now to have a look at the text. This is the whole text together. If you want to pause it and if you need to take a photo of it or print it or anything like that, that's absolutely fine. If you've got it in front of you already, then you're already ahead, which is fantastic. So I want you to have a read of the text. I'm going to zoom in a little bit, then you won't be able to see it all. So I'm going to just move it down a little bit there. You can pause the video and read that section. And then when you finish that, if you read the bottom bit as well. So I'd like you to read the text, and then once you've read the text, then come back to the video and I'm going to go through it with you. So the first thing I'd like you to do, please. Okay, so hopefully you've read this by yourself. Now I'm going to go through it. There are a few tricky words in there. I'm going to read it to you and hopefully that will help you with any of the words that you found a little bit tricky. So it's called Rosa Parks and it's by Kate Russell. And the first subheading or subtitle up here is segregation. 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 In the early part of the 20th century, many Southern American states had laws that decided where people could go and what they could do, based only on the colour of their skin. This was called segregation. And our next heading, Rosa Parks is arrested. In 1955, I'm going to zoom in a little bit for you. In 1955, an African-American woman called Rosa Parks got the bus home from work. In Montgomery, where she lived, Black people were only allowed to sit at the back of the buses. Rosa was sitting in the front row of the Black section when a white man got on the bus. There were no seats for him in the white section, so the bus driver asked Rosa to move. She refused, so she was arrested and taken to a cell in a police station. She had to pay a fine before she was released. What's a fine? She had to pay a fine. Pause the video. Talk to whoever's near you, talk to your teddy, or just have a think. What is a fine? Okay, so she had to pay a fine, so she has to pay money to be able to be released from the police station. So they've arrested her because she didn't want to get out of her seat, rightly so, because a white man has got on the bus and said to Rosa Parks, who is an African-American woman, to get out of her seat so he can sit down. She refused to, so she was arrested and she had to pay a fine to be released from the police station. The Montgomery bus protest. After Rosa's arrest, many Black people in Montgomery refused to take the bus because they didn't like segregation either. Instead, most African Americans chose to walk, and some bus companies went out of business because there were so few people getting the buses now. The buses weren't able to get the money that they would normally getting, so they were going out of business. Nearly a year later, the American courts decided that Black people could sit anywhere on a bus, so the Montgomery bus protest ended. So people were walking miles and miles to get to work because they refused to go on the bus. So they thought, why should I not be allowed to sit where I want to sit on a bus? So they walked and they managed to win the right to be able to sit wherever they wanted on a bus. However, some white people were angry that buses were not segregated anymore, and they threatened the Black people who had been part of the protest. Rosa Parks had to move to a different city to protect her family from people who complained that the changes were all her fault. Remembering Rosa Parks. Rosa Parks inspired many African Americans to protest against segregation. Her actions in 1955 were directly linked to the Civil Rights Movement, which campaigned for African American people to be treated fairly. Before she died in 2005, Rosa Parks said, "I would like to be remembered as a person who wanted to be free, so other people would also be free." And that is the information there. And it is, like I said, it's all factual. I know it doesn't sound like it should be because it's terrible what happened, but that is true, and it's not even that long ago, really. That is actually what happened. Okay, so we're going to have a look at the questions now. So if you'd like to pause the video now to have a look at the questions, that's absolutely fine. There you go. We've got 6 questions today. And looking at the marks, they are all worth 1 mark. See down here, they're all worth 1 mark. I'm going to go through with you how we can work it out, how we can work out our answers and where we can find them. And then you're going to have a look at another text tomorrow with me, but it'll be a bit more independent like normal. So question 1, look at the first paragraph. Find and copy one word that means the same as rules. That means if you write more than one word, you're not going to get it. You need to write one word and you need to copy it. So that means you can't make up a word. It needs to be in the text. And we're looking in the first paragraph, a word that means the same as rules. So let's have a look. I'm going to zoom in again. Our first paragraph is a section about segregation. So I'm going to read it again. And if you hear a word that you think means the same as rules, they break the rules or you keep the rules, I'd like you to write that down. In the early part of the 20th century, many Southern American states had laws that decided where people could go and what they could do, based only on the colour of their skin. This was called segregation. Now, I'm hoping you may have heard a word in those couple of sentences that mean similar or the same as rules. Okay, I'm going to read it again. I'm going to stop when I get to the word. In the early part of the 20th century, many Southern American states had laws. So if a state or a country makes up laws, they're making up the rules, aren't they? They are the rules, but they're called laws. So that is the word I was looking for, L-A-W-S, just there. So well done if you got that one. Okay, let's have a look at question 2. Choose one. Segregation meant that people can't do some things if they were too tall, they were left-handed, they had black skin, they were female. Now, you might already know the answer to this without me even having a look, but I'm going to have a look for some people if they find it a little bit trickier to know the answer. So our important word in that was segregation. That's what paragraph we're going to be looking at. So let's have a look again at that paragraph, which is at the top, and we're looking at what segregation is. In the early part of the 20th century, many Southern American states had laws that decided where people could go and what they could do, based only on the colour of their skin. This was called segregation. So it meant they could only do some things because they were too tall, they were left-handed, they had black skin, or they were female. Which one do you think it could be? Pause the video and have a think. Okay, good. It said it was only to do with their skin colour. So they had black skin was the one we needed there. If you ticked more than one, you're not going to get the mark. You have to read it really carefully and only choose one. Okay. Question 3. What was the crime for which Rosa Parks was arrested? What was the crime? So let's have a look and see what section we'll be looking at. Rosa Parks is arrested. So a bit like I've always said, often, not always, the questions are in order. So question 1 and 2 was up here. Question 3 is down here. Now, I'm not saying the next question will be down here, but it could be. And normally they are in a certain order. So we're going to have a look at the Rosa Parks is arrested section. And just remind yourself of the question again. The question was, what was the crime for which Rosa Parks was arrested? So let's have a look. In 1955, an African-American woman called Rosa Parks got the bus home from work. In Montgomery, where she lived, black people were only allowed to sit at the back of a bus. Rosa was sitting in the front row of the black section when a white man got on the bus. There were no seats for him in the white section, so the bus driver asked Rosa to move. She refused, so she was arrested and taken to a cell in a police station. Okay, so I'd like to pause the video. There's room on here as a line, so I'd like you to write down your sentence. For what was the crime? What did Rosa Parks do that caused her to be arrested? What did she do? Okay, I hope you've got an answer for question 3. So she refused to move out of the seat on the bus when she was asked to. That is what crime, it's not a crime, thankfully. Now, but then in America, that was a crime. She refused to move when a white person came on the bus to let them sit down instead of her. So that was what the crime was. So well done if you got that one right. Okay, question 4. Find and copy one thing that happened as a result of the Montgomery bus protest. So find and copy one thing that happened. So again, this isn't a made up, this can't be a, oh, I know what it is, write it down. It needs to be exactly what it says in the text. Let's have a look. So Montgomery bus protest in this paragraph. So let's have a read of this again. After Rosa's arrest, I'm just going to zoom in a little bit for you. After Rosa's arrest, many black people in Montgomery refused to take the bus because they didn't like segregation either. Instead, most African Americans chose to walk and some bus companies went out of business. Nearly a year later, the American courts decided that black people could sit anywhere on a bus, so the Montgomery bus protest ended. However, Some white people were angry that buses were not segregated anymore, and they threatened the black people who had been part of the protest. Rosa Parks had to move to a different city to protect her family from people who complained that the changes were her fault. So the question was, find a copy of one thing that happened as a result of the protest. Now there's quite a lot, and when it says as a result, that means there was the protest and then what happened. So in those two sections there, in that paragraph about the Montgomery bus protest, there's quite a few examples of things that happened afterwards. I'd like you to pause the video and I'd like you to choose one, but remember you have to find and copy one example. It can't be your own word, you need to find the sentence and copy it onto your piece of paper. And I'll give you some examples of what your answers could have been and we can mark it after that. So pause the video now and give yourself some time to look for that and write it down, please. Okay, so after the bus protest, one answer could be some bus companies went out of business. That's absolutely fine. You could say the American courts decided that black people could sit anywhere on a bus. Some white people were angry that buses were not segregated anymore. White people threatened the black people who had been part of the protest. Rosa Parks had to move to a different city to protect her family. Any of those things are as a result of the bus protest. So if you wrote any of those, you got a mark. Okay, so well done to make sure you've copied it exactly from the sentence in the text onto your piece of paper. Okay. Question 5. Why do you think Rosa Parks was blamed for the buses no longer being segregated? So Rosa Parks, I just said, she had to move cities to protect her family because she was being blamed. Why do you think she was being blamed for the buses no longer being segregated? Pause the video, have a think, and write down your sentence of why you think she was the one to, why people blamed her for it. Okay, hopefully you got an answer for question 5. So people blamed her because Rosa Parks started the protest, didn't she? She refused to get out of her seat and got arrested and had to pay a fine. And that's what started the protest, the Montgomery bus protest. So that's why they blamed her, because she was the first person to do it. So well done if you got that. And question 6, number the events in the order that they happened to Rosa Parks. You've got 4 sentences. Rosa was taken to a police station. Rosa refused to give her seat to a white man. Rosa moved to a different city, and Rosa had to pay a fine. So I'd like you to write 1, 2, 3, 4, which sentence or which order they would go in. So pause the video and have the go at that, please. Okay, so number 1 was this one here. Rosa refused to give her seat to a white man. Number 2, Rosa was taken to a police station. Number 3, Rosa had to pay a fine. That was to get her released from the police station. And the last one, Rosa moved to a different city, and that was because people were not being very kind to her and her family. They were blaming her for the protest and for the buses no longer being segregated. Okay, well done if you got those. That's really good if you got some of those right. Some of them are a little bit tricky, and today's text had a lot more writing, I think, and some trickier words than normal as the other comprehensions. Okay, so tomorrow we're going to be having a look at a text about Mary Seacole. It was all sent out in the text list and with all the tasks at the beginning of the week. So try to look at it before tomorrow's lesson. If not, I will do the same and I'll pause it at the start of the session. Make sure you put your answers onto Tapestry and your teacher will check it as soon as they can. Good luck, and I'll see you in tomorrow's comprehension. Bye, Year 3.